Please welcome to the stage We Heart Seattle founder, Andrea Suarez. Tacoma Police Union President, Henry Betts. The City of Kent Mayor, Dana Ralph. And your moderator and morning show host, Bryan Suits.
Mic check. All right, before we, thanks everyone for coming out, by the way. And before we start, I thought I'd have Ms. Suarez, Mr. Betts, and
Mayor Ralph.
And the mayor, Your Honor, introduce themselves.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Andrea Suarez. I founded We Heart Seattle, a 28-month-old grassroots coalition. We've picked up almost 1 million pounds of trash and helped over 175 people off the streets with private funded donations and at the hands and feet of volunteers in the city of Seattle.
Yeah, hi. Middle-aged white guy, balding, so yes, I'm a cop.
Oink.
Saw that coming, right? My name's Henry Betts. I'm actually going to give you a different perspective. We have a lot of chiefs, sheriffs, a lot of big leadership in the room tonight. I'm more of a worker. I'm a detective there. I've been 20 years in the city of Tacoma, but I'm also the union president, and I represent the officers, detectives, and sergeants that work for Tacoma PD, give kind of the working perspective. Thank you.
All right, Dana Ralph, Mayor for the amazing city of Kent. Thank you. On a mission to explain to people why Kent's a great place, and going to take care of my city any way I can.
And thank all of you for coming. For the purposes of this audience and me, I think it's important to point out there's the homeless industrial complex, and then there's people that do it without tax dollars, and that's Ms. Suarez and her foundation. So that's why she's up wearing a yellow vest that says ambassador or something. I was recently asked by a BBC podcast that they're concentrating on the west coast of the USA, and they know that I spent 15 plus years in LA and purposely came back to what you all think is a mess, and they asked me to describe it, and I said, well, if you don't mind, I'm going to use a baseball analogy. And on the west coast of the USA, common sense comes to bat after everyone else has struck out. In this case, on third base is let's try to just be nice. Here on second base is somebody do something, and at first place in government, so it's foundation, law enforcement, and in elected office, it's they're at first base, it's this crap ain't working. And then common sense comes to bat. And so that's my approach. So we're talking about the crime, we're gonna get out of why they're in the tent, why they're homeless or RV-less or whatever. But once they're there, why does every municipality on the West Coast, except like San Diego, why does the crime rate go up? What are they doing different? What is it about the homeless population, and then within 10 blocks of them, the crime rate? In the case of Officer Betts or Detective Betts, if you know Tacoma and you know Bass Pro Shop, you know that whole neighborhood. Don't go there. So if you don't go there, you don't go to Bass Pro Shop. And Bass Pro Shop is armed security. So many people are walking in there and getting stuff and the whole thing. So we're going to focus on, okay, you're in the tent. Why does that make you commit crimes? So Andrea, in your case, you're dealing retail and with them in between committing crime or whatever. Can you tell who is going to sleep in because they stole a bunch of mountain bikes? And can you tell the difference?
Absolutely. I didn't set out to become a subject matter expert. We were birthed out of frustration why there were needles everywhere and trash in our parks and green spaces. And we just started picking up the trash and found a lot of truth in doing that and built trust and, frankly, mutual respect with people living outside rough, committing crimes. And the number one reason they're committing crimes is to fuel their addiction. And sometimes I wonder, are they the criminal, or is it their perpetrator, their kingpin, their pimp? And we don't talk enough about the upstream crime that puts that person where they're at, that's preying on that vulnerable person in the throes of their addiction.
So in the continuum of they're all criminals, which is what I say, and oh no, they're there because their bank laid them off and they were successful investment bankers and it's not their fault, they need a roof and not a tent. What would you divide it into a percentage of who you think is there because they just like to get high and steal my mountain bike?
Well, nobody has ID. Everybody's running from warrants. They're running from child support debt. They're running from a lot of baby mamas. I come from a family that was broken, and my biological father worked a cash job his whole entire life, so he never had to pay my mom any form of child support debt. And all of this started to click, why is everybody on the run, off grid, doesn't have ID, it's always stolen? All of our low barrier shelters don't require you to have ID. You could be Mickey Mouse one day, Peter Pan the next. And I started poking around and really realizing there's no accountability whatsoever in this industry. And people are committing crimes because they're allowed to feed their addiction. Until you've held a grown man in your arms who's weeping with $150 wad of dope to feed their addiction for the day that says, Andrea, I can't get arrested for my warrants, and no other social service provider is calling to get him into detox or any form of rehabilitation because we're supposed to meet them where they're at, and maybe this is their form of success. I mean, we're breaking down all of that that current narrative and encountering it and disrupting it through boots on the ground volunteering.
And so Detective Henry, here's the deal. Not all crime is drug crime, but there's been an increase in crime in general. And in Tacoma, we saw this outbreak of teenage, vape store robbers. And there was a guy with the 19-year-old with a prosthetic leg who stood out on the video. And it's, so I mean, in your experience,
clue.
Yeah,
it helps.
In your experience, with the guys that you run down for the murders and all that, are there any clean, non-addicted people that just want to steal stuff like the old days?
Yeah, I imagine there's some 10-year-olds taking Snickers bars or something, but that's not what we're focused on, right? I mean, when we talk about, man, it's so crazy when you look at it, historically speaking, a union president, all I would worry about is how to help my people, right? How do I help the cops? In the last 2 or 3 years, due to what the community's feeling, I don't even speak about the cops anymore. I don't. What we deal with is the cops show up 4 or 5 hours late in Tacoma because there's so many pending calls, and they're frustrated beyond their means, and we're so sick of being yelled at by the community for being late, not being there, not solving the problem because we can't book people, we're not taking them to jail. All these problems have just culminated that we're not seeing that theft that you're talking about. We're seeing the constant problem and the frustration of the community. So now at any one of these things where I speak, it's not even about the cops, it's all about regurgitating the frustrations that the community has when they've been handed their 13th case card for the victimization that they just keep seeing. There's a lot to that now.
Yeah. And can, Detective Betts doesn't speak officially for the Tacoma PD, I imagine, right? So can I ask you about recruiting and retention? Because this is a problem region-wide. We're hemorrhaging experienced police officers to Boise, to Laramie, to Madras, Oregon. They're fleeing these areas of the west coast of Washington and going to places where apparently they think they can enforce the law. Is that how you're losing guys?
Yeah, we've lost them out of state.
When I say guys, you mean men and women and all that?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely, it's horrible. Staffing is down almost in almost every agency. I was really happy to get to meet the mayor next to me because I talk really well about Kent. If you don't know, Kent is a fully staffed police department now. And that is an exception, it is not the rule. You'll hear, and you ask yourself, why is that, right? Is it just about money? Do they go there just to get paid? And it's not. Seattle pays their officers really well. Tacoma's doing okay, but we can't keep cops. And why is that? And I think the biggest missing piece is, do you support your cops? And when leadership, and by leadership I mean chiefs and sheriffs, I mean mayors, I mean councils, if you don't support your police, they're not going to stay there. And they don't, and you see it. And I've tuned into Kent City Council meetings, which puts a lot of people to sleep. Sorry, that's council meetings
Not
for
the
you.
most exciting.
But I've tuned into Kent ones just to watch cops get spoken highly of. They get awarded at council meetings. They get, they're loved in Kent, and now they're fully staffed. And there's a connection there that I think a lot of other cities are missing.
And for morale in your department, how is the community? So now that they see how bad it can be, or they think they're seeing how bad it can be, are the Tacoma police?
No,
I'll
I'll give you my best analogy for this. If you think back going into a Denny's, sometimes you get a good waitress, sometimes you get a bad waitress. If that waitress was having a horrible day and she had a horrible manager and she hated her job, what are the chances she's having a good day when she brings you coffee, right? Now imagine being a cop who, sees a bunch of political prosecution of cops, who sees, political leaders and leadership in their own chain throwing you under the bus or not caring about you. Carry that around for a while, and you just think, what are your chances of having your best day at your job? Imagine going call to call to call, and you're 4 hours late, and you didn't sign up not to do your job. So the chances that you're going to provide the level of service that everybody's paying the taxes for, it's not good.
So Mayor Dana, what percentage of your day-to-day job has to do with dealing with crime in Kent? And did you poach police officers from crappy police departments?
A significant amount of my day is dealing with my constituents that have been victims of crime, working with my officers on how we're combating that because of all of the things that the detective has just said. And the reality is, yes, we did a good job with laterals bringing them into the Kent Police Department.
And I'm assuming no Kent resident complained about a fully staffed police department, right?
So here's the struggle, though, and I think this is the second half of that conversation. We are fully staffed to the number of officers we have budget for, which is very different than being a fully staffed police department. Data shows that Washington State is 51st in staffing per capita for police. 51st, let that sink in. Like, we are at the very, very bottom for officers per 1,000 residents.
Mayor, if I may, just to put that in context, you've heard of New York City, small city on the East Coast? They have one cop for every 235 people in New York City. In Tacoma, we have one per every 600 residents. So just think about that.
Yeah, we're at like 1.2 for every 1,000 residents. So yes, we're fully staffed to budget. We're not fully staffed to what we need to do to serve our community. So we have the exact same issues. When we have an incident, my officers have to determine, is this violent assault that's happening the most important thing that I have to do, or is it the robbery down the street, or is it, what we saw last weekend with the 200 cars taking over an intersection? And that juggling act, that running from call to call to call, is exhausting.
And these days, you can't do an intersection takeover without some shots fired. So
Well, apparently not anymore.
Yeah, and so and Detective Betts, I would defer to you on this. In your experience, training and experience, is it true that 2/3 or 3/4 of the crimes are done by 10% of the population, or let's say 1/4 of the criminals?
Absolutely. And there was a really
frequent
good study.
flyers, right?
Yes. Yep. Then there was a guy who did an independent study out of Seattle not too long ago that looked at their number one offenders and how many. There was a small number of people that were just in and out of the system constantly. You sprinkle in some COVID like that. I keep waiting for a politician or somebody to say it's 2 weeks to flatten the crime curve, right? It's going to come down, guys. Hang in there. We're working on it. But it's a small number of people who repeatedly do these crimes. And I'll tell you what, if you're living with that, like in Tacoma a couple of years ago, maybe 18 months ago, we had somebody who lived on a block where they were repeatedly criminalized by the same homeless encampment. And eventually that resulted in a homicide because the neighbors were so upset that they ended up having conflicts with these people on their own, took it into their own hands. That's not the right answer. Law enforcement should solve that problem, but we can't. If we're 4 hours late and they're already gone and they come back later, we hate that that's happening more and more, but that is where we're at.
And there's that new RV encampment right there in Tacoma, right off I-5, and every neighbor that I can name names, but I won't. But my colleagues in local TV in Seattle and Tacoma had to edit out. They had to go looking actively for someone who said, I'm just glad they have a safe place to be. Everyone else said the crime rate went right through my roof. And these are hardworking people. This is not a wealthy neighborhood. And I mean, is there a correlation in Kent between, is there a homeless encampment in Kent?
We do, but I think the difference about Kent that sets Kent apart from a lot of our bigger cities is I've got officers that are actively, only 2 of them, but they're actively going around and they're addressing those camps as they pop up. So we don't let them establish because we know that it creates a problem.
I know that, like in my case, the most dangerous part of my day, I live in a certain bucolic little South Sound town just inside Thurston County, and we Wyoming love it. But I work on East Lake Avenue East at South Lake Union, and I can leave my car unlocked and wide open where I live because all my neighbors are veterans and probably used to wear Green Berets and all that. Maybe some say, but East Lake, I witness people, metastasizing off Capitol Hill with someone else's mountain bike, and the rhythm of this is they steal your stuff and my stuff, and they take it to a windowless van that's driving around Capitol Hill, and the guy will just give them $100 for your $3,000, Cannondale mountain bike, because all he needs right then is $100. And there's a weird rhythm to that, and it's like from when I get to work at 4 a.m. to when I leave at 9. And so are you seeing similar patterns like that what is crime o'clock in Tacoma? I don't go to work through Parkland anymore or Lakewood because that's all the murders happen from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. So I don't drive to work through there.
It starts shortly after midnight, ends about 11 p.m.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's Tacoma. No, but I think we do see a huge spike in crime related to the homelessness, and I think the frustration there is that we can respond to the camps, we can go out and we can do things, but the cops can't solve it because we really took away our ability just to book people in. And I think the bigger part of the conversation is you look at that, and what blows me away is you see people experiencing mental health or drug use that gets them into mental health, and now we don't do anything with them. We're not gonna grab them and go take them someplace against their will. And so now we've decided that compassion is just leaving them there. And it's not. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that that's compassion to leave them there.
No. And so, Andrea, when you're dealing, what time of day is most effective for you? And is there a time or a profile of a person who comes forward and says, I'm done with this crap. My tent's full of mountain bikes. I want to go into housing.
Well, our approach is intervention forward rather than harm reduction forward. Intervention is harm reduction, and we lead the way in our private, breaking current policy with a, hey, how can we give you a hand up and out of this hot mess rather than meeting you where you're at and giving you more peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So I think it comes down to a model and approach because we pick up the trash and level set the power dynamic. Getting dirty, picking up the trash, it's a level of respect and love that the homeless have not felt, whether they're in the throes of their addiction or untreated mental health or committing crimes all day. I mean, so many homeless are like, I'm so sick and tired of being coddled. I'm so sick and tired of being a criminal. I'm so sick and tired of selling my body and turning tricks for fentanyl. And I'm not talking about women. I'm talking about straight men who are selling themselves to perverts on the street, who are waving money out the windows of their car down 3rd Avenue, preying on vulnerable boys and youth wearing a hoodie and a skateboard. I've seen it, I have videos of it, these are my clients. And so I think it's about an approach, and it's 24/7, and about these areas to avoid. Don't go down 3rd, don't go down this intersection, don't go down that intersection. I would encourage you to go very much down that intersection. The reason why it's that way in the first place is because we've, as a society, have avoided it. I think we have to lean in and activate those hot spots and go into our parks and clean up the trash. Prior mention was the broken window theory. I say it's the we heart theory, and we have to start caring and volunteering and lending a helping hand. Each and every one of us can be an outreach worker.
And it's funny because here on the West Coast, there's a couple communities, and I always say, folks, it's got to hit bottom, and it's got to be rebuilt. It has to shatter. Some of the elected officials in King County and the state, they don't see the problem. The problem is how much more tax money can they pull out of you and repurpose it to hire their niece, or whatever. That's their goal. I mean, they actually have a vested interest in some of these people remaining in addiction. And I met, where we lived in LA, in the high desert of LA, I met people that were homeless and they just were out camping. They stayed there with their pit bulls. And, they talked to you at the feed store and they're like, nope, I live, 8 miles up the hill there. They were not committing crimes. But that's why they lived out there, because they couldn't live where services were, because those were all criminals. So there is a way out. Phoenix is doing it right now. There is a way out. And like I always say on my show, it could be worse. We could be Oregon. So that's, if you haven't been down there. So big round of applause for Andrea Suarez and Detective Betts and Mayor Ralph of Kent. So thank you all very much. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.